to explore the midline, really. The midline from front to back. And we'll go from thinking of one bone in the skull to considering the skull and the pelvis and the line through the body. And to do that, we'll also be looking at the jaws, the maxilla and the mandible. But really it's this three-dimensional space and this division between the cranial skull, housing the brain and the central nervous system, and the visceral skull, the face, and its connection through to the gut. And maybe I'll share my screen. And look at this rather extraordinary bone, the maxilla. It's interesting, remember the bones on the face are they're mostly in pairs. And this is the, smack bang in the middle of our face, the maxilla, the upper jaw, and it's in two pieces here. Forms the hard palate. You can see the hard palate there. Forms the base of the nose. Sorry, the base of the, yes, it forms the base of the nose here, and also the top of the eye sockets. And as well as that, the bridge of the nose, part of the bridge of the nose. And the thing that's, then it houses the teeth. And the thing that's interesting about it is it's hollow. You have this big sinus down in there. The teeth connect into it. And, that just directly underneath your eyes, you've got this big sinus there. So it's quite a large bone in that way. But when you think it's hollow, it changes the sense of it. Let's just have a look at this model. It's quite a substantial part of the face. Look at the base of the nose there and the base of the eyes. That's really curious, isn't it? Think of that, the base of your eyes and the inside bottom of the eye sockets there, and the base of the nose. And it connects into the zygomatic bone, which forms this one here that forms the side of the eye socket, and then connects around to the here to the temporal bone. And it also connects the maxilla also connects in with the sphenoid bone, the back of the eye sockets here. And it's funny that you have all these bones through here that are in pairs and filled with their soft tissues, and then above it you have the frontal bone, and just behind it you have the sphenoid bone, and then at the bottom of it you have the mandible. And this is the interesting thing, is that the mandible, if I take away this connective tissue here, the mandible connects right back to the ears. There's the ear canal in here. And the feeling in the face is, when we open our jaws, we're opening it right back to here. You consider, to buy, well, often, we eat such soft foods now, this processed food, that we don't have that same experience of our jaws that we would if we were a lion, say. But, so we often don't get the sense of biting into something with our top teeth, but they do. It's a really important part of our face. But the thing is, it floats. So the jaw has this connection back to the ear, back to the midpoint, which is what we're going to be exploring today, this midpoint down through the center of the body here. But the nose, also the maxilla, it has this sphenoid bone and the zygomatic bone in the way. It's sort of a buffer. But the feeling of opening the jaw, opening both jaws, is still the same, that these bones here move, and it means to open your upper jaw, you've got to move your spine. So, we'll be looking at that today. Just consider this lion's jaw. We have about 70 pounds of force we can generate with our jaws. A wolf only has 68. A lion has 400. And a great white shark, 1,800 pounds of force, and a crocodile, 2,000 pounds of force. But, it's still similar. You've got all this collection of bones here, but, not so much differentiation between the cranial skull, because we've got a much bigger brain, and the visceral skull. But still the lower jaw here, with this little projection up to the side, but, much bigger nose compared to ours. But the body plan's still pretty similar. And the thing that's interesting is that, from here, if we look at the upper palate, or in fact, let's remove the lower jaw for a second. Look at the upper palate here. That, the upper palate and the nose is like it's the top of the visceral cavity. The visceral space that extends from the top of the nose, and really the eyes too, right down inside the torso. But look at the top of the teeth here. It comes, they come right up to, almost where the eyes are. So if we're looking from below through our body, this line here, along the top jaw, through to the ears, is like the way our body is projected forward into the world from the midline. And backwards, from the ears out to the side this way. And it's a funny thing, because we often think of our body in two dimensions, to the fact that we're looking at images all the time. People tend to think of themselves in this dysmorphic, as flat. And I find that people often, myself included, I'll project an image of myself that I'll refer to in front of me. And it's one of the reasons, I think, why you see people and, they're standing, if you look at my little image, they stand backwards, they lean backwards like this with their chest behind their pelvis, because the sense they have of their body is being projected in front. Which is different to the actual reality of our body. It's from here directly down through your throat, through the rib cage. And if we now change our model and look at the skeleton, we have this line through here. The lower jaw back to the ears, the upper jaw back to the ears, and, from the upper jaw up into the eyes is this V shape that way. So if we're walking in, and this midline here, that's what's defining forward. That's the midline. And if we look at it from where'd I get to? Help, I'm lost. Here we are. if we look at it from the side, this midline through here, through the inner ear here, it comes out directly at the top of the skull, which is flattened at the moment. I can't go back any further for some reason. But, directly down here and through the midline here and down to the middle of the feet. He's tipped a little bit, this skeleton, but, it's halfway between the front and the back and right through the, center of the pelvis here and down into the center of the feet. So you think the way the body projects forward and the way the body projects backward, it's this oval, elliptical shape. And if we look at, you've got this line here, and from here, the bottom of the rib cage around to the midline as well. Back actually to, about here, the floating ribs. Because when you're considering the midline, we're really considering the viscera from the sides. It's a little bit they sort of mix and match, and we'll do a little bit of that today, how they blend together, and certainly more next week. But, this shape here from the front round to the back at the sides and down here. From the front of the pubic bone round to the sides here. Down at the sitting bone. Going from the front to the back. So if you look from below, this line here round to the midline, and actually I'm going to get you to think of it around and out to the side of the hip socket like that. And then from the back through here and around to the front that way. We can project that straight up through here and see from the front around to the sides here. And from the back and the back of the rib cage around to the sides. In the shoulders, from the top here, from the top of the rib cage around to the side of the shoulder blade. Under here and from the back, across the back of the shoulder blades and across the front there. And then up here. Whoops. Front round to the back. I can't quite get, and from the back of the head round here, round to the ears as well. And in our two-dimensional sense of ourselves, particularly when we're stressed, this is the thing that's missing, this sense of the volume of our body, the depth of our body from front to back. It's a really amazing thing to actually consider. An amazing thing to consider too, that this part here, it's such a solid, think boxes are getting punched in the head, really hard, and it survives. The nose in here gets broken, but the structure actually survives. So all these little joints in here, they're actually creating a lot of strength that gives this ability, to move and adjust. Right, that stops us being so brittle. Despite the fact that the bones are also fine and filled with holes. But it's also the experience of the nose. All these small bones, it's the soft tissues. They're so sensitive inside the nose and inside the mouth, and all this, epithelial tissue inside our body. It's so delicate. And when we're moving the face, it really involves movement of the spine. I should need the big one. To open our top jaw, the head's going to sort of open and pull back, tighten a little bit the back of the neck here. But, many people, when they're doing that, they'll just tighten the back here. They'll tighten their neck. rather than extending the entire spine. And that's what makes it hard for people to look up when they're outside looking at the stars. Often they'll just bend their neck here and not extend the entire spine, or consider the back and the front. And that's really the opportunity. And it's, if you do bend the spine, then you can have this sense of using both jaws and being able to bite, being able to open your mouth, and feeling alive in the mouth. So here, I'll stop sharing my screen. And one way to, people who live in remote places, maybe it's the same all around the world, but in Australia, around the north, the top of the country, you'll find a lot of people, their faces are fairly impassive. They don't move their top lip in order to speak. It's just this, it's quite a different way of actually expressing yourself when you do that. Compared to if I use my lips, my whole face opens and it's really different. Is that the same in the US too? Right in the center there, people living in Montana, growing dental floss. People have very sort of flat voices and, don't move their face very much if they're not doing that much social interaction.
When you started talking like that, I was thinking it sounded like someone who's had a stroke. And when you think about it, it's like they have less use of their whole mechanism,
Yeah. That's right. So, it's actually to move the face, to move these bones in the upper jaw, it requires this activation of all the soft tissues around it as well. The lips and, of course, the tongue, everything. And it's this thing that gives the sense of everything being solid and strong. Welcome, Sandra. And so let's explore this, shall we? Could you find a place on the floor, on your back? Oh, and you'll need a bit of wall for this lesson as well. Oh, and some parts of it also, you may not want to be on screen, because I'm going to get asking you to open your jaw and consider the jaw and the pelvis, and so feel free to turn your camera off or just to be off screen. You can always come and look at me if you're worried about what we're doing, but it should be pretty simple. So look, lie down on your backs. So lie here on your back and sense the midline of your body from the front to the back. So that's from just in front of your ears and down through the middle of the chest, perhaps out through the sides of the shoulders. Center of the rib cage out to the floating ribs at the sides. And center of the pelvis from front to back at the hips. So think of that line down through the middle of your body and out through the top of your head. You think, where is the middle of the head, the top of the head from front to back. Through the legs down to the feet. The midpoint between front and back. And how that midline sits relative to the floor. You know, the shape of the back of your body as it curves around from the parts of your back in contact with the floor around to the sides. And think of your skull and your spine and pelvis. Your limbs, shoulder girdle and your legs. And the shape of the back of your body. And then the shape of the front of your body. Shape of the front of your body. From the midline at the sides out to the front. The viscera. You know, from your eyes and nose. Your mouth and down through your airway into your rib cage and belly and pelvis. That whole volume in there. And think of the round shape. From the pubic bone and the pelvis round to the hips. And from the rib cage into the lower rib cage, think of that arc around the lower ribs out to the sides. And from your upper palate, around and back to the sides, to your ears. Two bones in the upper jaw. Take your tongue and feel your teeth now, and feel the front teeth at the top, how they connect into the upper jaw. See if you can feel that division between the two upper jaw bones with your tongue. You slide your tongue up onto the hard palate. Feel that line that divides the space. And above that line you have the septum of the nose, because the hard palate is also the base of the nose. And feel that bone that you're feeling now, sliding your tongue between the two front teeth at the top and up and over the hard palate. The maxilla bone also forms the bottom of the eye sockets. Or sweep your tongue from side to side now and feel the shape of the upper palate, the upper jaw. And the teeth. How they sit within that jaw, whether they're straight or whether they're a little bit twisted. And the little bits of, the bone where the teeth enters the jaw there. And how the gums sit over that. And think of it, at the front it's forward and at the sides it goes back. Maybe take your fingers and feel that upper jawbone with your fingers. You can feel your teeth. You can feel the base of the nose. And right out where it comes up to the cheekbone there, and maybe you can feel that joint in the cheekbone just next to the bridge of the nose where the next bone begins, the zygomatic bone. But feel the width of your upper jaw. And consider the teeth. They're vertical when you're standing. Define a sort of a gateway between what comes into your body and what stays out. And they point up toward the eyes, toward the nose, around the nose, up toward the top of the visceral space. And if you place your hands now, around the side close to your ears, maybe one finger on that little bumpy bit of bone at the base of your skull at the back, which is the temporal bone there, mastoid process. Hold on to this and now move your jaw, your lower jaw, side to side, a very small movement. And consider the width of your jaws. And how, as you're doing this tiny movement, tiny, very slow movement with your lower jaw, you can feel the lower teeth moving past the upper teeth and then coming back. Breathing through your nose. Maybe you can sense that entire space in the mouth and the nose. And then the airway behind that in the back wall of the throat, continuing down through the neck into the rib cage. And consider, where you have your fingers here, the ears, that's the midline of the body from front to back. Sense that now down through your torso, down into your rib cage, feeling where is the midline as you're moving your jaw side to side. And sensing that continuous space from the nose down into the rib cage. And then from there down into the pelvis. Down to the midline at the hips. look through your body, directly down, not from in front. So you sense the round shape of your front. And you could let your hands down now and just leave the movement of your jaw. And just consider that shape from the front going out and back to the sides, at the jaw, at the ribs and at the pelvis. And look within your body, straight down through the neck. And maybe place your hands at the bottom of the ribs, just at the sternum there, and trace the lower ribs around to the sides and back to the midline. You meet the two floating ribs. It's about the midline. And think that shape there, going from the front back and out to the sides to the midline, that's reflecting the shape in your upper jaw. Consider the two shapes and think through your body to them. And then think from your pelvis, from the front of the pelvis down to the sitting bones. That's this V shape. You could place your hands, hold on to the sitting bones underneath your pelvis. Feel where they are, out to the sides. And then imagine that line going directly from there. The pubic bone goes directly up to the pubic symphysis. In fact, you could place one hand on the front of the pelvis and one on the sitting bone to feel how that bone extends, just like the upper jaw, from the front to the back. And maybe hold both sitting bones again and feel, from the pubic bone round to the sitting bones and maybe out to the sides of your hips where your hands are. And, think of that shape from the front through to the back. Roll your legs a little bit and your head. Roll your legs and your head. Tiny, tiny movement so that you could feel the shape of the upper jaw from the front round to the back at the sides of the ears, and the pelvis from the pubic bone down to the sitting bones and around to the back of the hips. Because as you're rolling your legs, you probably feel they're round. It's a curious thing about the pelvis that it's both convex and concave at the same time. In that we're round. If you go from the outside, it's this convex shape. It's pushing out to where your hips are. It's this round quarter circle from the pubic bone around to the side. But from the inside, the bone, it goes from the front of the pelvis down to the sitting bone and around behind that, and you can feel that reflected in the round shape at the back of the leg. And from the front of the pelvis, you can feel through the inside of the leg around the back to the outside of the pelvis. And similarly, you can feel from the back of the pelvis, from the sacrum out to the side of the hip, but also from the sacrum through to the sitting bone and around the inside of the leg, around to the front side of the hip sockets. But it's from the front to the side, that shape. Take your hands out now. Just notice that shape. Think down through your body, through the top of your head, through the upper jaws, down through the rib cage and through the inside of the pelvis. So you can sense that shape from the front of the pelvis down to the sitting bones. And now roll your head once again and think of the back of your head, the quarter circle going from the back of your head out to each ear. And the quarter circle going from the base of the nose, that's the maxilla, these upper jaw bones, round to the ears. And maybe lift your knees, stand your feet on the floor. And as you're rolling your head over to the right, can you press down on the left foot and raise the left hip? That rolls your pelvis over to the right. And then come back to the middle as your head comes back to the middle, and then press on the right foot to raise the right hip and roll your pelvis over to the left. So you're rolling your head and your pelvis side to side. And now feel the back of the pelvis and the back of your head. Rolling along a quarter circle from the center of the back out to the side. And of course your rib cage is probably being influenced as well, so it's rolling a little bit to each side. So you're feeling how you're rotating the midline here, the ears and the hips and the shoulders and rib cage. The round shape at the back to the midline at the sides, and the round shape at the front. Sense that from the upper jaws around to the ears, front of the rib cage round to the sides, and front of the pelvis back to the sitting bones and out to the hips. And then roll over onto your side and come up onto your hands and knees. Come up onto your hands and knees. And just sense, where is the midline here? You're looking down, thinking of the ears and the sides of the shoulder girdle and the sides of the hips. Move yourself side to side, thinking of that midline from front to back. And of that midline from side to side, down the middle of the nose, through the septum, through the middle of the tongue. And just begin opening your jaws. Opening your jaws as you move side to side. As if you're eating something. As if you're one of these mythical creatures like the turtles who support the world, support the universe, sitting on top of each other, all the way down turtles. And you're this mythical creature who drives the continuous change in the world through eating. So think of actually biting something and, taking it into your body. The feeling within you as you open and close your jaws. And now leave that and begin to crawl slowly. And notice the midline. Crawl up toward a wall. Slowly, feeling the midline. And place the top of your head against the wall. Think, where is the top of the head? That's the midline from front to back. You're probably resting on that joint between the two bones that form the sides of the skull, the parietal bones. Roll your head a little bit side to side over that bump. And consider sides, of your ears, shoulders, and your hips as you're going side to side with your head. So you're resting on the cranial skull here that houses the brain. Connects directly to the spine. And then in front of the body, in the front of the skull, we have the visceral skull, our face. Just pause there in the middle. And now open and close your jaws. Both of them. And notice to have the sense of the upper jaw opening as well. It's a movement of your mouth. It's a sense of all the soft tissues that connect everything together, participating. And it's a movement through your spine. To open both jaws. You're opening your spine, allowing the spine to move so that your head can move. And notice, the movement of the spine as you open the jaws through the shoulder girdle and down into the pelvic girdle. And in fact, roll your head up and down. Roll your head up and down the wall as you're opening and closing your jaws. Quite possibly you're opening your jaw as you're moving, you're rolling your head down, arching your back. And notice how the process of moving the whole spine, feeling it through the pelvis, the bones at the sides of the hips, and how your rib cage can move as well, how the shoulder blades are sliding around the rib cage as you're rolling your head so that the whole of your back can arch and round. And the feeling that gives you in your face, does it make it easier to feel the width of your face and to open both sides? Leave that for a moment. Just come back and sit in or rest in whichever way is comfortable. And then come up onto your knees and come up close to the wall on your knees. And could you place your nose and your lower jaw on the wall? So you just sort of put your nose and your jaw on the wall. Now, that may be a little bit awkward. You know, you're having to bend your neck a bit, but let everything else relax and see how can you make this comfortable. You know, so you have your lower jaw, which goes right back to the ears, and the upper jaw. And it's a funny thing, it extends back to the ears via the soft tissue and the other bones. But you know, at the back of the throat, you have the eustachian tubes. The little tubes that go directly to the eardrum. And in fact, if you can come away from the wall and just yawn for a second. And when you feel your ears pop, that's when, you know, that's the eustachian tubes opening up. And they go right back to the eardrums. So once again, come back with your nose and your chin on the wall. And think right back from your upper jaw to your ears. And then think of softening through your legs and your hips and your shoulders. So your neck can soften. So you can lengthen the whole spine. And maybe move your hips, your pelvis side to side. Moving your pelvis side to side, or in some way that enables you to relax through your body so that this position could be more comfortable. You know, you're relaxing around the back of your body. But you're also relaxing the front. You know, and think from your nose and your chin and your upper teeth out to the sides and back to the midline. You know, right through your hard palate and your soft palate to the throat. And think right down through the throat into the rib cage. You know, and how this movement of your pelvis can enable you to soften in the shoulders and your rib cage. So you can lengthen through there. Lengthen through the belly. You know, right down to the pelvis. So, you know, you could feel in the pelvis from the pubic bone through to the sitting bones and around the leg out to the outside of the hip. You know, the feeling of the shape of the bone in the pelvis. And then come away from the wall and just sit in whichever way is comfortable. Rest here. And consider that, you know, down through your um, the inside of your body, from your upper jaw, and down from the eyes, really. Because remember, the upper jaw, it forms the base of the eye sockets. Right down from the eyes, through the jaws and down through the rib cage, through the middle of it, and right down into the middle of the pelvis. And once again, come back up to the wall and place your nose and your chin on the wall. And sense how you can soften now. And this time, rotate your rib cage. So one shoulder is coming close to the wall and one's going away. And only go as far as is easy. Maybe you can't really move at all. But just sense here, how can you soften through your legs and your pelvis and your face, right out to each ear. When you think of the midline from front to back and the round shape of your rib cage, along the top of the rib cage, across the collarbones to the center of the shoulder, and from the back along the shoulder blades, the spine out to the shoulder blades and out to the center of the shoulders. And how rotating there influences your neck, how it needs to soften and turn so that you feel this space inside the neck right up into the visceral skull, right up into your mouth and your nose. And the bottom of the rib cage, from the front there, underneath that bony bit at the front, the sternum, and goes down and out, just like the upper jaw does. Goes from the front to the back, around to the sides, to the midline. And from the back of the rib cage, around to the sides at the midline. And notice where you're looking. Where are you looking now that you're thinking of these things? You're looking down or straight ahead. And what's happening in your eyes and your tongue? When you're considering the midline, are they peaceful, the eyes and the tongue and the ears? Or is it busy? Come away and sit again, just rest here. Notice where your eyes are looking, how they sit within the sockets of the eyes, resting on the upper jawbone, the maxilla, the bottom of the eye sockets, sides of the eye sockets, the cheekbones, the inside of the eye sockets, the maxilla, and that bone we did last week, the ethmoid bone at the back there, comes right up into the skull case and forms the top of the nose with the top of the bony septum. And in front of that, the lacrimal bone between the maxilla and the nose, the upper jawbone and the ethmoid bone, the top bone of the nose. You have that little bone that the tear ducts pass through. Look straight ahead. Just think of the softness of the eyes resting in the eye sockets. Frontal bone forms the top of the eye sockets, the forehead bone that is. And at the back, the sphenoid, that butterfly-like bone. And then sense your tongue sitting on the bottom of the jaw, connected to the bottom of the jaw. You know, the underside of your jaw, it's all tongue. And it's in two halves, like two hands held together in prayer. Move your tongue ever so slowly, side to side. In fact, come back up to the wall. Once again, on your knees still. Just with your chin and your nose against the wall. And sense your tongue and your eyes. Let yourself look forward. Let your eyes and your tongue be soft. And now slowly move your pelvis side to side again. And at the same time, move your tongue. It's a tiny movement with your tongue. So it's not touching the sides, but you can feel each side of the tongue moving. Just as you can sense each side of your pelvis moving. And sense your tongue right from the front to the back. You know, it comes back to the midline, or actually in front of the midline. But of course you can feel it because the muscle of the tongue also extends back to the, near the ears, on the base of the skull. So feel the bottom of the tongue and the pelvis from front to the midline, from front to back, via the midline. As you're moving your pelvis and your tongue, and sense through your body, the shape through your body. And of course we're on our knees, we're not on our feet yet. What difference will that make? You know, notice what you're feeling through your lower legs, through your feet, and your arms as you soften yourself here, moving your pelvis and your tongue. Feeling all the small bones in your face. Maybe roll your head as well, roll your nose and your chin on the wall as you're moving your pelvis and tongue. And then leave that, come away from the wall and come up to stand. Come up to stand. Come up to stand, facing the wall, and once again place your nose and your chin on the wall and notice how it is here. See, here you can bend your knees. You can move your pelvis back, you can bend your knees, and you can feel the front of the feet and the heel, the whole foot adjust. And try in this position here, just moving your pelvis and your tongue side to side, sensing the space inside your body, through the body, not from in front or behind, but right through the body. That shape from the front around to the midline, going backwards from the front, around the face to the sides, to the ears. And the feeling through your jaw, and the feeling through your pelvis from the front out to the hips, via the sitting bones. And let yourself lean against the wall. Let your legs bend some more so you feel your pelvis and your front against the wall, where you can comfortably. It may be that you just have one part of the front on the wall, or one hip, or one shoulder, or whatever. Just wherever is comfortable, but just see, can you roll your head ever so slightly here? And notice the arc that your neck needs to travel. Now, make it really small. Don't force anything, because you probably need to roll your rib cage in order to do this. And in order to roll the rib cage, maybe there needs to be some form of adjustment in your pelvis and your legs. How can you make this easy and feel the roundness of the front of your body and sense it from the inside? So it's easy. So your eyes could be relaxed. You can smell and taste. And still tune into that shape, that round shape. We'll come away from the wall for a moment, turn around, just notice how that feels to stand here. Your capacity to feel down through your body, from the top of your head down through the midline, and to sense the shape on each side, how from the midline it projects forward. And then lean back on the wall with your back to the wall. Notice how you're sitting here. Give yourself time to relax in your legs. Your head maybe away from the wall or on the wall, wherever it's comfortable. And sense the midline from here, down through your head, through your ears, sides of the shoulders, sides of the ribs, sides of your hips. And the way the front projects backwards and out to the sides to reach that midline, and the way the back projects outwards and forwards to reach that midline. And roll your pelvis side to side. And can you feel where your sitting bones are? maybe place a hand down there so you can feel how the sitting bones move as you roll your pelvis in one direction, and then back to the middle, and then over to the other, how they rotate. And, you could have one finger on the pubic bone and one on the sitting bone at the back to get a sense of that V shape in the front of the pelvis, and how that's reflected in the V shape of your upper jaw. From the front of the teeth around, backwards and out to the ears. And of course, as you're rolling your pelvis, your rib cage is rolling, and feel that V shape in the lower ribs out to the sides. And then through the top, you could roll your head now and your rib cage side to side, feeling the round shape of your back and how you roll across that quarter circle in each direction across to the side, to the midline. Maybe you can feel that in the front of the shape of the front of your body, the front of your nose and your upper jaws, round to the ears, the base of your eyes, from the top of the nose there, round to the ears. And then leave that. Just rest here against the wall. And move your head up and down. Move it down to look toward the floor, and then back toward the wall. And notice how your head moves, where it touches the wall. Is it in the middle between the shoulders, between the hips? Or does it go over to one side? So consider the nasal septum, each hemisphere of the brain and each eye as your head is moving forward and coming back to the wall. And are you touching the back of the head, or is it over to one side? And as you're moving your head forwards and back, what is happening through the rest of your spine? What's happening in your pelvis and your rib cage? Are they rolling a little bit too? Because as your head's moving forward, of course your spine is moving. Well, keep your head against the wall, the back of the head against the wall, and now roll your head here side to side. And notice, maybe it's a little bit easier now. You could roll your head a little bit further. But, what happens in the rib cage? What happens in your pelvis and on each leg? The feeling in each shoulder. And if you consider the midline from front to back, how that's being moved. And you could also sense the shape in the front, down through your body to your pelvis. And come away from the wall, just stand there for a moment and notice how it feels. Where's your midline now? Does it feel like you could lift off into space now? Well, come back, stand with your left side to the wall. Your arm down by your side, you've got your left side there. You know, if you lift your left leg, you could really lean against this side. You could feel your left hip pressing against that arm and your left shoulder against there. You could maybe even move your head over, although that may be a bit tricky. Feel what part of your head touches the side. But, you know, consider the midline between front and back. And have your head wherever it's comfortable now. And just, once again, bend your head forward. Look down toward the ground. And then look up toward the ceiling. Or up toward the sky. Looking and feeling the movement in the hip sockets and in the shoulder girdle as your ribcage slides around the shoulder girdle. So your arm is being held still, but your ribcage is moving because your spine is moving. And it's this movement here of the whole spine that makes it easy to look up. And consider as you do this, you know, the back and the front, you know, the cranial skull and the spine and the shoulder girdle and arms and legs, pelvis, and the visceral skull from your eyes and nose and ears down into the pelvis, through the belly. Maybe as you're looking up and looking down, open your jaws. Feel the full width of your mouth, but only don't strain. You want to find how can you soften through your body, through your legs and through your torso, so this movement is even, and that you can really have a sense of opening your jaws softly. The width of the upper palate, the width, of the teeth, right back to your ears, and that space like you could swallow the world. You can feel it right through to your foot. And then pause there. Come away from the wall. Just notice how that feels on each side. And then turn the other direction. Lean against the right side. Feel the hip and against your arm, the shoulder against your arm. You could have most of your weight in your left foot if you like, so you're really feeling that movement there. Your knees are unlocked, and now look down and up here and feel the movement through your whole spine. The back and front of your body relative to the midline. You could open and close your jaws. Feel how the whole face can soften. Widening the upper jaws. Widening your eyes. Allowing your legs, allowing everything to soften to make this movement easy, so you can feel the whole front of your body from the inside, from the front projecting backwards to the midline. The pelvis, ribcage and head. And then leave that And just sense how it feels to stand here now. Maybe lean back against the wall, roll your back on the wall once or twice just to feel the difference now. And then come away. Then walk a little bit and sense how that is. And then once again, just come back down onto the floor and just lie there and rest for a moment to feel the difference. You know, what's the feeling here? Sense the midline from front to back. Also from side to side, down between the eyes and nose and right down to the pelvis. But, you know, right down through your body, feeling your body through the inside. The V shape of the upper jaw, and eyes run to the ears, and through the chest, and through the pelvis. Maybe you could do the tiniest movement of your head and your arms and legs side to side, like a millimeter in each direction. So you could sense the midline from front to back. And your capacity to feel that from the inside now compared to the beginning. Well, leave that and roll over onto your side when you're ready and come up to stand, and let's see how it feels in standing. You know, if you really think of that shape between the front of the pelvis back to the hips, front of the nose and upper jaws back to the ears, and front of the rib cage back to the sides. From the inside, you know, does it make it easier to feel the back? And, you know, as you begin to walk now, you know, transferring your weight from foot to foot, you know, how is that? when you can really feel the midline.